Minister, I want to welcome you into the Chamber today. I'm very happy to bring forward this motion on behalf of the Labour Party this evening on young carers in Ireland. I want to begin by thanking representatives of Family Carers Ireland and the young carers who did a briefing today for members in the AV room. It was powerful to hear first-hand about their experiences and the impact providing care can have on these young people. These young carers are children and young people under the age of 18 whose lives are affected in the most significant way by the care needs of another family member or household member due to their illness, disability, mental health difficulties or problems with drugs or alcohol misuse, and who provide care to help to provide care for that person and minister. There are also young adult carers which are recognised as a separate group and are aged between 18 and 24 years. I had the privilege earlier today of listening to the stories of Sarah Ann, Benjamin, Conor and Lucy's experience of being a young carer. Anyone listening to these stories earlier today will be truly moved. They spoke about love for their family, of sacrifice, resilience, loneliness and the toll of caring can have when there isn't support. Sarah Ann spoke about how the first thing she thought in the morning wasn't about her friends or her school, it was what was needed to be done. She said that there was no time to fall apart, no time to be a kid. Her brother Benjamin spoke about the bullying he experienced. He told us how he didn't want to be a burden to his parents, pushing it all in until he couldn't anymore. Lucy, another young carer, is 14 and helps care for her brother, mum and dad. Lucy describes having to grow up faster than her friends because of her caring responsibilities. At only 14, caring is her priority, not school, even though she has got good grades. Conor is 20 and helps care for his brother who has a syndrome, a condition which causes developmental difficulties. Conor looks after his brother for a few hours or the odd day, but this can impact on his college studies. These stories are just a small example, a representation, Minister, of the 67,000 young carers in Ireland today. These 4 young carers spoke about the love of their family members that they help care for. And while they are not the primary care, they play a very, very active role in providing care in these households. Carers like Sarah Ann, Benjamin, Conor and Lucy are faced with difficult questions that no other young person is faced with. Should they be at home helping more? Can they even go to college? I spoke with another young carer today who wants to study nursing when they finish school. But unlike their non-caring peers, this young carer is worried about whether they can even move away from their home to study. There are so many young carers who have skills beyond their years due to their caring role. Many, like these young people, want to go into the caring professions, an area which there is a recruitment crisis in, and they would thrive due to their experiences of providing care. There are young carers who are having to trade time with their friends or other activities due to their caring responsibilities. These issues are endemic amongst many young carers today. These young carers are a hidden population to many teachers, employers, health professionals, government and indeed society. We all know these young carers. They are often the children sitting patiently in a waiting room while their sibling is with the doctor, the young adult who failed a college exam because there's not enough time to study and care for their mother. There isn't a doubt in the minds of these young people that they will continue to provide the care for their family members, if indeed, but they shouldn't have to do so. Young carers and all the mothers, fathers, grandparents and other carers out there save the state, Minister, an estimated 20 billion in unpaid care work each year. That is close in itself to the annual budget of the HSE. They are also an invisible backbone of our health service. Caring households are providing 19 million hours unpaid care work each week. These families are faced with additional costs due to caring. 2 in 5 have a household income of less than 30,000 a year, and nearly 70% find it difficult to make ends meet. According to Family Carers Ireland, of those struggling financially, 29% are cutting back on essentials such as food and heat. 49% have to pay privately for services that should be publicly available, and 72% of carers have never received respite. We need to acknowledge the immense contribution young carers bring to society, and we also need to acknowledge the fact that in many cases these young carers wouldn't be providing such care if the right supports were in place to help their loved ones to begin with. There are thousands of children that are overdue an assessment of need and thousands more with an inappropriate school place. These stories of young carers show profound impact on their educational outcomes, mental health and indeed life opportunities. Young carers tend to receive lower Leaving Cert grades compared to their peers. They are less likely to go further or in higher education or have their choices limited as not being too far from their own homes. Young carers report poor emotional health and well-being outcomes and lower life satisfaction compared to their non-caring peers. Over 90% of young carers feel stressed. 56% of young carers feel they cannot cope. 80% are at risk of depression. More than one-third have reported being bullied at school, and 1 in 4 young carers have gone to school or bed hungry because there was not enough food at home. Despite the significant care work taken on by so many young carers, government has no plan or strategy to support their specific needs. Our social protection system fails to recognise their value, as the rules on carers allowance and other income supports are indeed a major hurdle for young people in accessing or continuing in further and higher education, training or employment. Like many deputies, I have read over and over the programme for government, and while it's disappointing to see government will take so long to abolish the means test for the carers allowance, they have also forgotten young carers and young adult carers. There is an urgent need for a new national strategy for carers that specifically recognises the needs of young carers. It is only through Family Carers Ireland that these young carers have any real support outside of their family. The organisation supports over 1,000 carers through membership and a range of programmes and services. However, they can't continue to do this alone, Minister. The support they provide barely reaches all these young carers that need such vital support. The Labour Party motion before the House will address these issues, which includes calls on government to establish a cross-departmental working group on young carers and designate a department with lead responsibility. Commit to develop a new dedicated programme of supports and services for young carers and young adult carers through a new national strategy for carers. Ensure that ministers in the Department of Education and Youth and the Department of Children, Disability and Equality recognise their responsibilities to young carers and develop appropriate support programmes. And recognise the unpaid work and young carers with guaranteed respite days, be introduced the introduction of a young carers grant and educational bursaries, dedicated funding for counselling or psychological support and increased carers payments. Ministers, I've said previously in the last couple of days, it is time to shine a light on the young carers in this state that do so much work at home, and I ask all members to support this motion tonight.
Did you move the motion?
I move the motion.
And I'm proud to second the motion. I want to commend my colleague, Deputy Mark Wall, for bringing forward this important motion, and I want to commend and pay tribute to the work of Family Carers Ireland, and in particular to the work of all the young people engaged in care. And we heard, as Deputy Wall has said, we heard today so many powerful testimonies from young people who themselves are providing care to siblings, to family members, carers like Lucy, Connor, Benjamin and Sarah Ann, who were so eloquent and yet who's so honest about the impact that caring has had for them and for their families. They were all very clear also that they do not see their caring role as in any way burdensome, that they do this for love, and there's nothing burdensome about loving a family member. Those positive feelings of love, positive feelings around the desire to see dignity for the sibling or for the family member who requires care. That shone through as well from the testimonies of the young people that we heard from. But the problem is, Minister, when the state is outsourcing supports, when the state is not providing sufficient supports to young carers, then caregiving does become physically, emotionally and financially draining. The young carers we heard from spoke about the stress caused for them and for their family because there are not sufficient supports in place from the state. And there are very specific economic impacts from the dereliction of duty. Deputy Wallace set out the profile of young adult carers as established by the ESRI. They're receiving lower Leaving Cert grades. They're less likely to be able to take up places in further or higher education. They're less financially empowered. Government policy has failed to understand and recognise the stress placed on young carers, and as a result, Minister, they feel forgotten and it's harder for them to cope. We need today to recognise the immense contribution made by young carers to society. We need to ensure, as Deputy Wallace said, that we shine a light on the work they do and that government policies offer them sufficient support so that they can fulfil their true life potential, as can those family members for whom they're providing care. And Minister, we've heard from so many young carers who've spoken so powerfully about their experience, not just today in the AV room, but from young carers who have contacted us over recent days in light of the motion that we're bringing forward. One young boy of 11, Noah, asked me to speak about his worries for his younger sister Willow, who has cerebral palsy. He tells me how hard it can be when she becomes unwell. He's very proud of his sister, but he's very worried for his future and for her future when his mum grows older and he will assume even more caring responsibilities. Another young man who told me about the supports he provides for his autistic brother. He says, I don't have friends over as my brother doesn't like people, but that's okay, I understand. But it can be hard. Caring can be fun sometimes, but sometimes I also just want to do normal things that families do. And these are powerful testimonies, Minister. Powerful testimonies from those who see their friends who are young carers, who cannot continue on to higher education because of their care role, because of their care responsibilities. These are the real experiences of young carers in Ireland, 67,000 of whom are in this state, giving daily supports to the state and to their families. Minister, the state cannot continue to apply a financial penalty to young carers. It cannot see them continue to sacrifice education, job prospects or mental health in pursuit of their caring responsibilities. We must support young carers, we must abolish cruel policies like the means test, and we must implement the policies and the measures set out so clearly and comprehensively in this motion that will ensure that our young carers get the supports they need and that their families and those who need care within their families are also adequately supported by the state. We owe it to the young people like Noah, like Sarah Ann and Benjamin, like Conor and Lucy, from whom we heard today.
Thank you very much, Chair. In preparing for today's motion, I couldn't get away from the thought that if tens of thousands of children were working in any other industry in this country, unpaid, unrecognised, unsupported and unprotected by the state, it would be an absolute national scandal. Yet day after day, this is happening in homes the length and breadth of the country, where young people are, as my colleagues have said, forced to fill in the gaps left by the state. And they do it because they care, and in many cases because they feel and they know the state couldn't care less. Take, for example, an eloquent young man who made contact with me recently seeking help in getting carers allowance. This is a young adult carer in his early 20s who looks after his mother full-time. This bright young man was pursuing an education that was to lead him into one of the medical professions, unsurprisingly. But his mother's worsening condition and the increased time he needed to be at home to take care of her made continuing on that path impossible. He's also had to turn down the chance to work across the water. This is a young man that sacrificed a lot, but he's not asking for the world. He's just looking for a normal life and the opportunities all of us at that age took for granted. Asked what he needed, he just said, and I quote, "a little help to get by." So far, and for reasons I can't get my head around, that little help to get by in the form of carers allowance has been denied to him, but the case is under appeal and I sincerely hope that he will be successful. Now, this is a double failure by the state. A failure to support these young carers and young adult carers, but also a failure to provide state-supported care for the adults who have come to depend on them through no fault of their own. And the impact, as my colleagues have set out, on young carers of all of this is absolutely profound and acute. In 2023, the Sharing the Caring report from Family Carers Ireland found that as Deputy Wall has said, 80% of young carers are at risk of clinical depression, and more than half feel they simply cannot cope. So the question is, what are this new government's plans to deal with this social emergency? There isn't a word about young carers in the programme for government. There's no recognition of the unpaid work young carers do in our social protection system, and the rules governing carers allowance and other income supports often act, quite frankly, as barriers to young adult carers accessing or continuing in further education, training or employment. This is the definition of a poverty trap. As this motion calls for, we need a new national strategy for carers, specifically one that recognises the needs of young carers and young adult carers. We're behind some of our closest neighbours in this regard. Scotland, for example. Scotland just last week signed up to what they call the Young Carers Covenant. And we've stopped in this country in recent years being innovators in the space of social progress, and we need to catch up. And we could do so by implementing, for example, this covenant. It's a commitment to a fair future for all young carers and young adult carers, and we should look at adopting it in this country. Young carers and young adult carers, they're not asking for much. They do the work they do out of love. All they're asking for in return is for their futures to be protected and to feel that the structures of the state are wrapped around them in support of their work, not a constant barrier they must butt their heads against relentlessly in order to make any progress.
I want
to thank my colleague, Deputy Mark Wall, for the amount of work that he has done on this motion. I really welcome the motion. I want to welcome those from Family Carers Ireland into the gallery today and welcome the speakers that we had today, the carers. This motion, as I said, I think is really important. There is a huge amount of people across the country that provide 24/7 dedicated care to a family member of theirs. And I want to take the opportunity to commend every single carer across the country, but in particular young carers. This motion is seeking the opportunity for young carers to be recognised in the state. There is an obligation now on the Department of Education to provide dedicated programmes of supports specific to the needs of carers. Right now in this country, the Department of Education nor the Department of Children have dedicated support programmes for young carers in Ireland. We need to see the implementation, as this motion calls for bespoke programmes in schools to recognise and support the needs and circumstances of young carers. What's most important in education, and you know this, Minister, is that we try and give every single child across the country the greatest education that they can possibly receive. That is on the department to give that education. We will be unable to support young carers across this country if we can't give them the opportunity to develop their education while they provide this vital care. Today I was struck in the AV room at the gut-wrenching almost meeting that I had with the carers, the Family Carers Ireland and the 4 young carers. Conor told us that he lives 2.5 hours of a bus journey away from University of Limerick, where he is studying, and lives constantly in fear that if something happened at home, how quickly could he get back? Conor added, if something was to happen to his mother or to his father, it will stop him from pursuing his own career in education. I will have to be the one that provides for my family. That's what Conor said. 14-year-old Lucy told us that she felt invisible in school and expressed her concerns, at 14 years old, expressed her concerns about the lack of support and services available in our schools. Benjamin informed us that he didn't get the support in school despite reaching out to the school staff. He expressed his disappointment in anti-bullying policies just being a tick-the-box exercise, and his concerns that a lot of young carers go unnoticed in our system because of the stigma that surrounds it in our schools. Sarah Ann told us that young carers like her exist in the shadows. These interactions were stark, Minister. Family Carers Ireland have support programmes right across the country. They have 2 young care support workers, funded by Family Carers Ireland, not by the department. These young carers that we speak about have often so much piling up on themselves. And we know the issues, Minister, and you know them as well. We have tens and thousands of children waiting on essential therapies. We have over 10,000 children waiting on assessment of needs in this country. And it's these very people who are sitting in the gallery above us, Minister, are the ones that are dealing with this on a daily basis. I'm calling on you, Minister, to support this motion, and I'm asking you for your government to support this motion. Garvmacht.
Agad a hachta nish Ara Norman Foley.
Gurmagus Cancórla a Sochtanama agus an Desho Huirtham. I welcome this motion from the Labour Party because it does provide an opportunity to discuss the importance of family carers, particularly young carers. And I particularly want to acknowledge Deputy Wall in proposing the motion. And I want to acknowledge the work of Family Carers Ireland. And I also want to acknowledge all of those that you have referenced here today, Sarah Ann, Benjamin, Connor, Lucy, Noah, and equally importantly, all those who have not been named but do the work. I absolutely acknowledge that. I do want to say that the government recognises family carers as key enablers for government policy to support people to live with dignity and independence in homes and communities of their choosing for as long as possible by providing vital care to some of our most vulnerable citizens. We know that family carers are the backbone of care provision in Ireland at all times, and I do appreciate that. We know that between Census 2016 and the most recent census in 2022, the number of carers increased by 53% to 299,128, or 6% of the population, up from 4% in the previous census. Caring is not a gender-balanced profession. Around 61% of carers are women and 39% are men. The motion speaks to the life impacts on a young person who cares for or helps to care for a family or a household member who has an illness, disability, mental health difficulties or problems with drugs or alcohol misuse. And we are all incredibly appreciative of young carers and all that they do for brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers or other extended family members. There were, as has been referenced, an estimated 67,000 young people between the ages of 10 and 17 providing regular care to a loved one in the home and the Health Behaviours in School-Aged Children survey of 2018. But I do accept, as the motion puts it, that the number is likely to be higher now given the rise in the overall population. Most of the work that young carers do at home is at home and therefore is unseen and unheard by the wider world. I'm conscious that Family Carers Ireland have an annual awards ceremony each year to recognise the contribution of young carers and to highlight the work that is done by young carers. I'm very conscious that there are young carers who are not only looking after siblings with special needs, but also simultaneously helping parents who have long-term illnesses. We know that addressing the needs of carers, including young carers, falls to a number of different government departments and agencies across a breadth of policies and services. And I'd like to outline just some of the range of supports that are provided for carers, including young carers, across a number of these departments. But before I do so, I've always been conscious of Rosalind Carter, the former First Lady and wife of former US President Jimmy Carter, who was a particular champion of carers. And she said, "There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver." Our healthcare system is very dependent upon the continuing supply of family carers, and their importance will increase even further as people live longer lives and benefit from advances in medical care. With the Irish longitudinal study on ageing showing that almost 3/4 of care in the community is provided by family carers, it is a significant percentage of the population. And this does include young carers. And the Government is committed to enhancing the financial supports available to them. The Department of Social Protection administers both the Carers Benefit and the Carers Support Grant, which are available to young carers in need of financial support. The annual Carers Support Grant is available to family carers who provide full-time care and assistance regardless of means or social insurance contributions and may be paid to carers from the age of 16. This grant can be used for any purpose at the discretion of the carer and is not taxed. This is not available for any other grouping. As part of Budget 25, the Carers Support Grant will increase by €150 to €1,000, bringing it to its highest ever rate. These supports are important because a report by the HSE's Community Healthcare West in 23 on the needs of carers showed the demanding nature of the work of a carer. It found that 93% of carers in their study were stressed to some degree, and 52% of carers felt so exhausted that they could not carry out their normal day-to-day activities. Almost half of carers in the study experienced problems with sleep within the last 3 days. No government support on its own can address all of these challenges, but it is important to have financial supports in place for carers, including young carers. A support that's available to carers over the age of 18 and over is the Carers Benefit payment. Carers Benefit is a non-means tested payment made to ensure to people who may be required to leave the workforce or reduce their working hours to care for someone in need of full-time care and attention. As part of Budget 25, Carers Benefit will be extended to the self-employed for the first time, and the earnings limit will be increased from $450 to $625 after tax. As part of Budget 25 and from January, there was a 12% increase in the weekly rates of Carers Benefit and Carers Allowance. This is the fourth successive rise in weekly welfare rates under this government. Rates have increased by €41 over the last 4 years. The Dormant Accounts Fund has been successful in directing funding towards valuable social purposes, and I'm pleased that the Dormant Accounts Action Plan of 24 through it, the Department of Social Protection introduced a measure to support family carers, including young carers, to access employment and training and education supports to improve their current and future employment outcomes. Funding of €1.2 million has been allocated for this singular purpose. I know from my own conversations with advocacy groups that the means test for the carers allowance is something that they would like to see removed. I was part of the team that negotiated the programme for government, and I'm satisfied that it sets out a timeline for, which commits to significantly further increasing the income disregards for carers allowance in each budget, with a view to gradually phasing out the means test during the lifetime of the government. As part of Budget 25, the weekly income disregard will increase in July from $450 to $625 for a single person, and from €900 to €1,250 for carers with a spouse or partner. The Carers Guarantee is the promise to have a core basket of services for carers across the country, regardless of where they live. Annual funding of €2.6 million is currently provided towards delivering it. The bulk of the funding, €2.44 million, is being provided to Family Carers Ireland to deliver a mix of community and individual supports across 5 areas of activity, including education and training, community carer supports, intensive emergency supports, a free phone care line, and psychological supports. The remaining €160,000 supports the development and delivery of online supports for over 8,000 family carers through Care Alliance Ireland by means of an online support group. Increased funding for the Carers Guarantee will also support the programme for government commitment to increase support for carers by providing new training opportunities to support them in their caring role. We know from research that caring is physically and emotionally demanding, and we also know that from our own engagement with carers. Young carers can put so much into it that they pay less attention, we're aware, and as you've outlined, to their own physical and mental health needs. Family carers in Ireland continue to report having poor health, less support, and feeling worried about the future than those without the same care responsibilities. In recognition of the need to address this, a pilot of a family carer needs assessment tool has been carried out in HSE Community Healthcare West with a view to establishing a standardised mechanism for assessing carers' needs and to improve access to supports. As regards the GP visit card, it's another important support for carers, and since September of 18, individuals in receipt of either a full or half-rate carers allowance or carers benefit are automatically eligible for a GP visit card. The Department of Health also administers the National Carers Strategy. A review carried out by Care Alliance Ireland and University College Cork in 2021 of the National Carers Strategy found that over 90% of carers feel the actions in the strategy were still relevant and wanted them retained. Before deciding on any future work to update the National Carers Strategy, consideration has been given by the Department of Health regarding the approach and the breadth of stakeholder consultation, and I particularly hear that the body of this motion concerns young carers, and I will be cognizant of that. We all know that caring for family members can impose pressures on young carers As I've said, they have duties and decisions to make that would normally be the preserve of an adult. It can be even harder for them when they are unable to spend as much time as they would like with friends who may not have the same caring responsibilities, or when they have to sacrifice some of their own interests and hobbies. I know that the well-being of all in the school community, including young carers, is a priority for my colleague Minister McEntee and the Department of Education. During my time as Minister for Education, I introduced a landmark programme of counselling supports in all primary schools in counties Cavan, Laois, Leitrim, Longford, Mayo, Monaghan and Tipperary. I extended this pilot project last year to 61 urban DEIS primary schools in Tallaght, Clondalkin, Finglas, Ballymun and Darndale. This counselling pilot allows experienced counsellors to work in the schools for the duration of the pilot, with blocks of up to 6 counselling sessions for a small number of children in the school. Schools have the freedom to recommend the children who need this counselling, and in many cases it may be children who have experienced trauma or a recent bereavement, but I believe the counselling may also be an important support for some young carers. It's important to point out that in relation to my own department, specialist disability services are aimed in the first instance at providing the right services and supports to enable people with specialist service needs live as independently as possible. That can reduce the care needs for people with disabilities and relieve the responsibilities of young family carers. Yeah,
I want to thank my colleague Mark Wall for bringing this really important motion before us today, and to acknowledge the incredible work of the children and young adults across this country who day in, day out provide support to their family members. I know they do it out of love and loyalty, and I know many don't even consider themselves the label of a carer. It's a way of life. They do it out of, it's a way of it is their life, and they do it out of necessity. And ministers, to that necessity that I want to speak today. There are children in this country, teenagers, young adults who are in caring roles, who are shouldering the burden of care because of an abject failure by this government and successive governments in this state to provide for sufficient health care in the community. We have a creaking system of community health care out there. We have fewer public health nurses than we did 5 years ago, just 1,500 public health nurses across the country. Now, what does that mean for the young carer and their family? There are less nurses in the community checking in on those patients and their families and their needs. So if the public health nurse isn't checking in on those families, who is? We have a horrendously long waiting list for home care support, over 5,500 across the state. Cork and Kerry, over 1,000 people on the waiting list. Clare, Limerick and Clare, 860. That means carers, young carers, are having to step in when the professional support should be in there. Respite beds, this is the lifeline of so many families out there, and yet we have dire shortages. And the worst feature for me in all this is that the HSE doesn't really have a grasp or handle on the level of demand out there. There's no centrally maintained waiting list. And all this culminates in the fact that we have no statutory right to home care support, to health care in the home out there. It's promised for years. I know it's a promise of this government, but we've yet to see it. The reality is disability and long-term illness can come to any home, and I know that all the money in the world won't make up for the impact on family members when that does come to a home, but money can make life easier. And we have a reality out there that those with money can buy some capacity, have some capacity to buy support if they need it. But for those with nothing, they have no backup. And time and again in the communities that I represent in Dublin Central, we see the vicious cycle of disability or long-term illness and families in poverty, the inability to work or the reduced capacity to earn. Time and again, I see families, particularly lone parent families, and when long-term illness visits that family, it falls to the young person in that family to shoulder the burden of care. That is wrong. We need the state to be able to provide much greater supports. The reality is that young carers are operating in are living in some of the most disadvantaged households in our communities, and it's a reality that this is a greater issue in working class communities. And when we combine disability, long-term illness and poverty, the impact on those children for their lives is profound. The reality, Minister, is that the failure of our state to provide those healthcare supports to people to be cared for in their home means we are failing children, and that has to change. And I urge you, Minister, to thank you for supporting our motion today, but we need action, we need real action, and we need it now. We can't afford to wait, because there are children, there are young adults in this gallery, there are thousands across this country who are relying on this government to ensure that we have a proper healthcare support system to look after their family members in the home.
Magad agus inis an tata Ciarán Hearn.
I'd like to begin by commending my colleague Deputy Mark Wall and his staff for all of their work on producing this important motion. I also want to especially commend the young carers who are with us in the public gallery this evening and who shared their really powerful testimonies with us this afternoon in the AV room. They shouldn't have to be here, but the reality of our broken system of care is what makes this motion so necessary. And I do believe our system of care is broken. I've been struck by the lack of supports or even acknowledgements available for young carers and the effects that this has on them from a social perspective, an educational perspective and a well-being perspective. I'm thinking, for example, of Anne, aged 20, and Barry, aged 17, who both provide care for their lone parent with an acquired brain injury. Anne cares full-time for their parent at home and Barry helps outside of school hours. The demands of their caring responsibilities are having a huge impact on their education. Anne can't apply for third level because her carer's allowance would be cut off if she undertakes studies for more than 18.5 hours per week. Barry is struggling to study for his Leaving Cert because simply he finds it difficult to find the time in the evenings and presumably the energy. Both Anne and Barry suffer from isolation. They miss out on social occasions, they rarely get a break. And there are thousands of young carers across this country, often hidden, who are struggling with little to no help. So I repeat, our system of care is broken. I had an interaction with a woman recently that stayed with me. As a young mother with a child with additional needs, she got involved in advocacy work because she didn't want another generation of parents having to suffer through the same difficulties that she had. That was 40 years ago, but the problems persist. She has spent 40 years battling for adequate respite, services and allowances, and the battle continues. All of us in this house every day get emails and calls from concerned parents or carers who can't access therapies for their dependents. In my constituency in Dublin South West, the need for more speech and language therapists is particularly acute. I met recently with the management team in Ballyboden Primary Care Centre. In 2022, they had 5 speech and language therapists. Today, they have 1 who works part-time. Part of the problem is that the pay in numbers strategy has effectively introduced a recruitment freeze unless they get rid of positions elsewhere. But also the fact that they had 2 vacant positions at the end of 2023, which were then disappeared. It points to the fact that in our care system, those who provide the care, be they healthcare workers, Section 39 workers, the parents of children with additional needs, or the young carers who are providing care for their loved ones, are undervalued and underappreciated. You have an opportunity here today, Minister, to do right by some of the most heroic but vulnerable members of our society, those young carers sitting in the gallery today, and I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and again just to commend my colleague Deputy Mark Wall, whose commitment to carers does not begin nor end with this motion. He has done and continues to do wonderful work, and indeed to commend the young carers who are here today. Nowhere in this country does the state get better bang for its buck than the money they give to carers, and that's compounded even more with young carers who get nothing, and what they give and what they save the state. It's absolutely apparent that this system continues. This is not the first time, nor will be the last, that we will debate carers in the Dáil. We did it a lot in the last Dáil, and yet very, very little has changed. We've focused with this motion on young carers, again, who have given the most powerful testimonies in our AV room here in the last Dáil, and indeed today, yet nothing seems to change. And the outcomes for our young carers, a study by the ASRI showed that there are long-term impacts for young carers, specifically around education, with lower Leaving Certificate grades and less progression to higher education amongst those young carers involved in caregiving. This has clear ripple and knock-on effects throughout their adult life, yet the state takes no role nor responsibility and remains willfully blind to these outcomes and effects. This needs to be addressed by cross-departmental work, and simply cannot be allowed to left linger unseen and untackled. We need to see the establishment of a working group on young carers, and equally as important, we need the department with lead responsibility, your department, Minister, to be held accountable. Motions on carers, as I said, were not rare in the last Dáil by any stretch of the imagination, but progress, unfortunately, has remained so slow. A real problem has developed with this government over the last number of years, and it is the same government where empty platitudes have taken the place of real action. And what carers have to deal with, even carers who are in receipt of carers allowance, is that is not an end in and of itself. They live with the constant spectre of the department over their shoulder, waiting to fall down for a review. Two, there is a mendacious culture in the department that feels that the money that's given to carers is something that should be reviewed constantly and needs to be given back and taken back. Like I'm working on a case at the moment where a caregiver who's in receipt of carers allowance relative to her daughter is starting a state-sponsored programme to try and get into the workforce with a few hours per week, well below the threshold, and they both wanted assurances that a review wouldn't take place in terms of the carers allowance because they've just been through a review within the last 9 months. So in making those representations very carefully, what happens? The department instigates another review. Disgraceful treatment of carers by the state, by the department of this country continues, none more so than the ignorance that is given to young carers. This motion goes some way to try and change that. We need more than just platitudes and agreement. We need action. It's a disgrace what's happening to our carers in this country. Thank you, Chair.
Louise O'Reilly.
Gormagat Cahirlock, and I'd like to welcome the visitors to the gallery this afternoon. I welcome this motion and I thank the deputies for bringing it forward. I thank those carers and their representative organisations who are campaigning for the abolition of the means test for carers payment. They have had a serious impact and they have forced the government into making a commitment. However, we know how much a commitment from this government is actually worth, and for that reason we will keep the pressure on until this cruel means test is abolished. Minister, we could talk all day about the valuable work done by carers, and I will remind you that just because they do that work with love does not mean that they should be taken advantage of. And some of this work is done by children not yet of working age. This work deserves to be recognised, and the impact that it has on a child and their development cannot be understated. But as well as the work that they do, and caring for a family member is work, and we shouldn't be shy about saying it. There are a lot that carers, and young carers in particular, do not do. They miss out on so many of the positive aspects of being a young person. They miss out on education, on socialising, on just having the time to simply be themselves. And they do it willingly, but it is work, and it deserves to be recognised for that. The motion calls for a range of supports and measures specifically aimed at young carers, which are to be welcomed, and I hope that the Minister will take on board the suggestions. In particular, the issue of returning to education is one which I believe is urgent and pressing. These young people are saving the state a fortune by taking on caring responsibilities, but the impact on their education has to be acknowledged. And now that the issue of young carers is on the agenda, I would like to take this opportunity to urge the government to listen to young carers, to hear their voices, to hear directly from them about the impact that combining the work of caring with their ordinary lives is having on them and what they need put in place to support them. I have spoken to parents also who are absolutely racked with guilt because they rely on the care given by young family members. They worry that they're not having the childhood that they deserve, that they're missing out on activities, on fun with their friends. Sometimes they're forced to miss out on their education. They will tell you that the lack of support from the state means that the young carer has to grow up too fast and that they effectively won't have a childhood. Minister, young carers are making up the shortfall for the state and they deserve to be recognised.
I strongly welcome this motion. Earlier today in the AV room, a group of young family carers gave a powerful description of the work they do and the impact the lack of supports is having and the utter lack of support they receive from the state. Carers are the backbone of our society. They are the quiet, everyday heroes who give everything to care for loved ones. The respect and high regard that carers are held by the public was crystal clear to see in the run-up to the last general election. Every party and group pledged to support carers to scrap the means test. But sadly, as is the way with Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, that commitment appears to be just another broken election promise. Because from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, we have seen no details, no timelines, no plans, just empty words leaving carers struggling on in uncertainty. This should have been a clear-cut action from day one by this government, scrapping the carers means test and ending the unfair, injustice and cruel financial punishment. Every day, carers make personal sacrifices, be it carers' income, their own well-being, to go and care for loved ones. A recent report found that 72% of carers never get respite. That 72% of carers don't receive significant formal support. And that nearly 70% of carers are struggling to make ends meet. This is an absolute disgrace and a shame on government parties for standing idle by. These carers deserve respect and dignity. The work they do saves the state 20 billion each year, but 76% are left battling severe loneliness and left abandoned by the state. As someone who's worked for 18 years as a carer working with adults with disabilities, I have always been proud of the recognition and respect that Sinn Féin has showed to the work of carers in our community. The Sinn Féin Charter for Carers clearly set out the value and respect that we have for carers and the significant role in society. We wouldn't sit on our laurels. We won't be stalling and delaying reports like the interdepartmental report has been delayed since March 2024. Minister, it's now time to act and publish the report now. Because the inaction of you and your colleagues in government isn't just a failure, it's just sloppy work. It is straight up cruel on the thousands of carers across the state. It is important that we say to all the young carers here in the Dáil gallery, to the carers turning in on TV in their homes, that we see you. We see the invaluable work you do and that we will not be silenced on this. We will fight to ensure that you get the respect and the support you are so worthy of.
I
want to thank the Labour Party for bringing forward this motion for young carers in particular. Their work has not been recognised and that needs to change. They need to be supported to be able to pursue their educations, to be able to live their lives as young people. I'm going to share the experiences of some carers in my constituency who I've spoken to in recent days. This is just a small sample, but all of those I spoke to feel forgotten and totally unsupported. Frances told me about her mother who cares for her father. He has Parkinson's and needs full-time care. She is only entitled to half the carer's allowance, which is demoralising for the amount of work she does daily. If she was getting the full amount, it would greatly ease the burden with rising costs and enable her to get help with other things such as cleaning, which she can't do as all of her time is spent caring for her husband. Lorraine cares for her 2 children with autism and can't get services for them. She's spending a huge amount of money on private services. She's on carer's benefit, and when that runs out, she doesn't know what she will do as they have bills to pay. Her hands are tied as she cannot work, so they've considered emigrating. Pauline cares for her 88-year-old mother who needs care around the clock. She was contacted yesterday by the department who wanted to know what was wrong with her mother and why she needed care. She says they made her feel like a criminal. Anne cares for her elderly parents who are both fully dependent. Herself and her sister put in over 100 hours work per week caring for them. They both work full-time to facilitate paying for private help so that some nights they can go home to their families and sleep in their own beds. She's overwhelmed, exhausted and hasn't had a break in years. If she could get some kind of payment, she believes she might be able to save something. Minister, the voice of carers must be heard, the voice of carers young and old, and the government must take action in response. Increased respite, increased payments, investment to ensure that people are allowed to stay in their own home if that is their wish. And finally, you must scrap the means test for the carers allowance. You made this promise during the election campaign and it's time to deliver on that. Carers can't wait any longer. You've heard from those today who are affected by this directly. So, Minister, I'm calling on you to do that as a matter of urgency.
I just want to welcome the motion firstly. The carers allowance is a hugely important issue that needs to be addressed. To be clear, the means test must be scrapped. This government should hang their head in shame. In the run-up to the recent general election, you promised to scrap the means test. 4 months after the election, you've done absolutely nothing. No plan, no detail, no timeline. You're too busy making grubby deals to actually address the real needs of struggling families. Sinn Féin were abundantly clear during the general election. We were committed to scrapping the means test, and we would have done it by now. Every day I see the valuable and essential work done by carers. I also see how they're struggling. This is a 24/7 job with little support or respite. In my own family, my daughter was a young carer for my mother. Right until the end of her life, she looked after her, which meant that my mother could stay in the family home, living with dignity, close to family and loved ones, and never wanting for anything. This is a situation that is replicated in thousands of homes right across the state, but it's simply not recognised or respected by this or consecutive governments. The government needs to listen. Young carers in particular need to be heard. They are regularly looking after siblings and parents while trying to continue their education when they can, in many cases with little or no support. The impact on their health and well-being is well documented. They are dealing with caring responsibilities when others the same age are developing and living their lives. The work that they're doing needs to be recognised. It's also worth noting that carers saved the state €20 billion. Unfortunately, the mean miserly politics of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, supported by some so-called independents, would rather ignore this fact. So I'm asking the Minister to do the right thing, scrap the means test, increase the carers allowance and support young and all caregivers.
Dr. Moira Devine.
My constituency of Dublin South Central is one of the highest percentage of residents with disability, and disability households we know are more likely to be in poverty. Several communities here are chronically disadvantaged and see children minding parents, especially in cases of mental health and addiction, which sadly often go hand in hand. In my previous role as a community nurse, I remember visiting a patient in Crumlin, Dublin 12, when I was introduced to his 11-year-old son, Declan, and I witnessed his caring for his single father and siblings due to his father's debilitating neurological disorder. He gets up early at 6, gets himself and 2 siblings dressed, fed and out the door to school, ensures his father has taken his morning meds, eats breakfast and can reach his mobile in cases of emergency. After school, there's no time for play. There's dinner to get, usually a prepaid meal that he's bought at the shops himself. He helps the young ones with homework, school, projects and then bed. If his father needs help to make specialist appointments or social housing assistant, Declan must do this before the office is closed for the day. Only after everyone else has helped can he start homework, but it's often at 9 o'clock, and by then he's truly exhausted. You know, he'd love to play Minecraft again, but recreation doesn't really fit into his life anymore. Minister, Declan doesn't think of himself as a carer. He's terrified of telling anyone in authority of his situation because he doesn't want his family broken up. That's his big fear. For all the uncertainty and his father's diminishing capacity, it's the only family he knows, and it's home. Declan and thousands like him desperately need better supports that actually reach them, in a system that proactively identifies and reassures them, allowing to be children during childhood. I wholeheartedly welcome and support this motion, but Minister, I really don't have faith in this government to deliver, given the ongoing dysfunction in so many areas that affect children, like TUSLA, CAMS, CDNT, special education, all woefully underfunded, understaffed, under-resourced and on their knees. Given the broken election promises for carers allowance, I challenge Minister the Government to address this motion with genuine, meaningful action. A shout out to all those in the gallery and for those who cannot be here. Children are our future. Please allow them to be children. Gurmagat.
Deputy Conor McGuinness.
And I thank the Labour Party for moving this motion and ensuring this important issue is aired in the Chamber. And I too want to welcome the delegation that are here to witness proceedings and the debate. And this debate does provide an opportunity to discuss the challenges and the frustrations and the failings that carers grapple with daily, to acknowledge the immense contribution that they make to the people that they care for, their loved ones, but also to society as a whole, and to propose measures, Minister, that will improve their situations and their outcomes. Young carers and young adult carers provide care, assistance and support to other family members, be it a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, sometimes their own children who have myriad issues. And that can be down to illness or disability, difficulties with mental health, drug or alcohol misuse, and they do so on an unpaid basis. And as other deputies have pointed out, saving the state an absolute fortune in the process. There are tens of thousands of these carers in communities all across this state, and while they provide the care out of love and loyalty, we must also acknowledge the very real context. They provide care because state services have failed. They failed them, and they have failed the person that they love and that they're caring for. And they're filling those gaps that have been left by the state, gaps that really shouldn't exist in 2025. We know that young carers face additional challenges and disproportionate impacts on educational outcomes, mental health and life opportunities. In many cases, they report poor emotional health and well-being outcomes, and lower life satisfaction than their peers, and we know that they are at a greater risk of poverty. I know young carers that have gone hungry in my own constituency, who have left education and who have become unwell due to the pressures placed on their families and on them by the failure of successive governments to resource services. Against the backdrop, it is nothing short of shameful that neither the Department of Education nor the Department of Children, Disability and Equality have a dedicated programme that recognises the specific needs of young carers and young adult carers. And the programme for government doesn't even acknowledge their existence, let alone offer proposals or commitments to improve their situations. Carers and their loved ones are not being supported and are struggling to cope. The voice of carers must be heard, and the government must take action in response, including recognising the specific situation faced by young carers with tailored supports and allowances.
Thank you, Deputy McGuinness. We now go to Deputy Paul Donnelly for 2 minutes.
I'd like to thank the Labour Party for bringing forward this motion, and also all of those carers out there who are doing the work day in, day out. I worked for nearly 20 years as a family support worker, and over those 20 years I came across many young people who are carers for their parents. Indeed, some were carers for both parents. We tried to give them as much support as we possibly could, but it was never enough, because when we finished our day, they could never clock off. From early in the morning to late at night, and sometimes throughout the night, they were the only carers. Their education suffered, their childhood suffered, because this state was using them to fill the gaps in the public services. I've seen at first hand the effects on their education, from doing really well in school to struggling to get to school or being constantly late, unable to study because the work in the home had to be done. The lost time with their friends, the lost opportunities to build a social life, to take on a hobby, to be part of a social club or a team. The frightening statistic of the report showing that many felt stressed, and I was absolutely gobsmacked at this one. 80% of young carers are at risk of clinical depression. That's the pressure that they're under. I support the ask of the Labour Party, but there are 3 things that I plead with the government that you can actually do really, really quickly. One is provide extra funding to family support initiatives, allowing more family support work in the home, taking the pressure off those young carers and young adult carers. To provide respite support for the carers. This would give young people caring day in, day out, sometimes 365 days a year, a bit of time for themselves. And I raised the issue of Blanchetown Centre in Independent Living, who received pitiful increases in supports, despite massively increasing the supports that they provide. And puzzlingly, got a reply from the HSE this week, because I raised it 2 weeks ago, asking for a business plan for BCIL, yet they already have it. It was given to them months ago. And then also, just in around counselling services and access to counselling services, it is really, really difficult. And those young people deserve to get the help and support that we need.
Thank you very much. Deputy Maurice Quinlan.
First, I can thank the Labour Party for bringing forward this motion regarding young carers. 67,000 children, let's call them what they are, provide regular care for adults to do so in an unpaid capacity. It is a burden that young people should not have to face, but it is a burden that impacts their development and often their mental health. 1 in 4 of them goes without food, goes to school goes to school hungry without food because there simply isn't enough food in the house. While this impacts of caring for a family member will of course impact young people more in terms of development, its role impacts carers of all ages. A carer provides significant care to somebody in need of care in the home due to illness, disability or frailty. I've been dealing with the case of a woman who is getting old but is still the carer of her grandson since he was 3 years old. He's now 19. She became her grandson's guardian and carer due to unforeseen issues, and she has provided all the support he needed. The young man has autism diagnosis, dyspraxia, profound learning difficulties and various mental health challenges. He is and has been a handful for her. To this day, he requires support in terms of washing, general personal hygiene, and becomes disorientated easily. His grandmother stepped in, and if she had not, the burden would have fallen on the state, as we well know. In January this year, her carer's allowance was cut as it was determined that the young person being cared for did not require full-time care and attention. She has appealed this, and I'm supporting that appeal for her, but now we can anticipate waiting 23.5 weeks, we were told, for a decision on the appeal, and we cannot be sure that this desperately needed payment will be reinstated whatsoever. I fully support this motion, but I must ask the Minister, why do we make things so difficult for these people who really are the unsung heroes of our country?
Carty.
I want to thank the Labour Party for bringing forward this motion on this important issue. The truth is that this state fails carers. We don't give them the support that they need and deserve, and we don't truly recognise that carers are not only providing the essential service to their own loved ones, they're also providing society with an essential service. The truth is, Minister, that far too many carers are struggling to survive. When you speak to those people who are caring for their family members, it's actually hard just to comprehend how they're actually doing it. And on top of all of the myriad of duties that we've heard deputies outline that fall to carers, we have added an extra duty to them. That's the duty to campaign. They have to campaign for recognition. They have to lobby politicians to bring their pleas to this House, urging government to do the right thing. Last year, in many ways, was a sea change. I hope it will mark a turning point in how this House, how society deals and recognises carers, because I think for the first time ever there was a political unanimity that we needed to do better. When Mary Lou MacDonald announced at the Sinn Féin Ardèche that Sinn Féin were committed to abolishing the carers means test, many people thought that it was pie in the sky stuff, but very quickly all other parties virtually followed suit and committed to doing so. Minister, you said that government will abolish the means test. Don't make people wait any longer than they already have. Please just do it.
Thank you, Deputy Carty. We now go to the Social Democrats, and first speaker is Deputy Liam Quaid.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I'd also like to welcome the delegation that's here this evening. I fully support this motion from the Labour Party. Family carers are a large group of people who have been tragically neglected by the state. They provide vital, unpaid care, often under severe financial pressure and with huge personal sacrifice. In the case of young carers, this sacrifice can include losing out on parts of childhood and carrying unsustainable emotional burdens. Caring for a family member can be all-consuming, and this often happens in a context where the person has been denied a range of supports that are essential to their well-being, their opportunities and their longer-term outcomes. I know from my own previous work as a psychologist that the role of being a young carer can give a person strengths and qualities, resilience, emotional attunement, resourcefulness that serve them well throughout their lives. They sometimes go on to work in the caring professions, are seen by friends as problem solvers with endless practical wisdom and emotional reserves. However, being a young carer can also have complex impacts on identity and mental health, and can place the young person in a role that is developmentally at odds with their actual age. And I want to pay tribute to one of the young carers who spoke with raw honesty in the AV room session today about the ambivalent feelings that her caregiving has given rise to. I also wish to commend Deputy Mark Wall for organising that event, and to the other speakers who shared powerful testimony at that session. An NUIG study from 2018 showed that 13.3% of young people between the age of 10 and 17 report being in a caring role. Extrapolation to the national population suggests that at least 67,000 plus young people in that age group provide regular unpaid care to a family member. Across a range of indicators of emotional health and well-being, young carers reported poorer outcomes than their non-carer peers. Young carers are at greater risk than peers of being bullied at school. 1 in 4 young carers said they went to school or bed hungry because there was not enough food at home. A 2023 study on young carers that was commissioned by Family Carers Ireland showed that 86% of participants felt stressed, 80% were at risk of clinical depression, 79% felt very lonely, 32% struggled to balance caring with school. Caring for somebody can be isolating, worrying and stressful. It can also negatively affect the person's experiences and outcomes in education and can have a lasting impact on life opportunities. And we know that young carers are 4 times more likely to drop out of higher level education. Young carers therefore need a range of social and educational and psychological supports to address the burden of care that they carry. Schools, colleges and universities need to work with young carers and young adult carer groups to ensure that they have appropriate policies and networks to be able to meet the needs of those carers who are pupils or students. Young carers need to have access to respite and emotional support and advice from mentors and, where necessary, counselling services. They need time to be with friends, to participate in sport and other activities or interests, and, in short, to live their life and develop their identity outside a caring role, which can be all-consuming. And looking more broadly at the picture for family carers, in Ireland it is estimated that around 500,000 people, or 1 in 8 of the population, are family carers. According to the State of Caring 2024 report, which is also commissioned by Family Carers Ireland, 74% of carers felt that those they care for are not receiving sufficient formal support, and family carers are left to fill the void left by the state. Stepping into this role as a family carer can often plunge a family into financial distress. According to the State of Caring report, 39% of carers have a total income of less than 30,000, and 29% have had to cut back on essentials such as food and heat as a result. In addition to the ongoing work in relation to phasing out the means test for carers allowance, I want to ask the Minister if she plans to increase the rate of carers allowance to an appropriate level, one that reflects the social importance of the work. The means test, as it stands, leaves many carers struggling financially and leaves them below the established minimum essential standard of living. It excludes thousands of carers and leaves others with reduced or partial payments. Currently, it takes no account for the cost to families of their mortgage repayments, the cost of other children in a family, medical costs for the person being cared for. It does not, in short, reflect the reality of life faced by family carers. So we really need to consider more than just a phasing out of the means test if we are really to help these families. And I want to ask the Minister about expanding on the ongoing work to review the eligibility criteria with a view to allowing more people to qualify. Will the Minister also consider making carers allowance a qualifying payment for the fuel allowance? And also, what specific measures for young carers will you introduce so that their specific educational, emotional and social needs are being addressed? Thank you.
Please.
Céirlach Báilm Buíochas a Gabhla Labour on as an ruin seo and fáilte to all the young carers and the Family Carers Ireland who are in the gallery and for those who are watching. I support this crucial motion because for too long young carers in this country have been invisible, working in their homes, providing vital assistance to their loved ones in their families and their communities. The sacrifices they make go unrecognised, their struggles are unheard and their futures are put at risk, all because we have failed to give them the support they desperately need, and at times they are filling a gap that the state has failed to resource. Young carers in Ireland, some of whom are as young as 10, take on responsibilities well beyond their years. They look after their parents, siblings and other family members who are ill, have disabilities, mental health difficulties or who are struggling with addiction. They are a hidden backbone of thousands of households, stepping up when no one else does. And yet, what do they get in return? As several people have said today, 67,000 young carers in Ireland from 2008 figures, but that's probably increased. So how many of those households are being failed by the state because it's falling on young children to take the burden of that care? Today, for those of us who were in attendance in the AV room, we heard from 4 absolutely amazing young people speak about their lived experience of being young carers.
They were absolutely brilliant, but it was kind of heartbreaking to hear of their isolation, their loneliness, their exhaustion, the lack of support. And that is, I did see their light, though, when they talked about being involved in Family Carers Ireland. They really felt supported, so well done to all those adults who are supporting them. But I was really struck, and I suppose because I come from an education background, and I saw before, years and years ago, when young carers were being supported in one of the schools I worked in as part of the school completion programme, there was a group for young carers, and it was absolutely lovely. Those young people were really, really cared for, and then that gave them the ability to care for others. You know, if no one's looking after you, how can you care for others? And I was struck as well by what they said today about the fact that the schools weren't really clear, or they didn't know, or there was a lack of understanding, or that they would be sitting exams and the teachers wouldn't know, or the SNAs wouldn't know that they're carers, or that it didn't matter if they had to have an assignment in. It didn't matter what was going on at home. They still had to have the assignment in on time, and yet, you know, they have so much other pressures that other students perhaps don't have. And I was really, really struck by that. So I really think it's down to the Department of Education to give schools very clear, direct and appropriate guidance on how we support children and young people who are carers, who are attending our schools. I was struck as well when they said there was no dedicated programme for a government programme to support them. There was no recognition in social protection. The means test for carers allowance has been brought up several times today, and other supports are kind of actively punishes the young adult carers who want to pursue an education or employment. I was very struck by the young person who is in college, and how fair is it if you that worry all the time in the back? He described the worry that he had if something went wrong at home, how long it would take to get home, and then just the constant worry that you can't think of anything. And anyone here who's had a sick family member, and I've had a few over the last number of years, that it just literally takes up every part of your being. You cannot think about anything else. And if you're a young person trying to get through school or college, that is a huge, huge problem. So we need to recognise our young carers. They are a priority, and they haven't been for a really long time. So this motion isn't just about a policy, it's about fairness. It's about dignity and about giving these young people the future that they deserve. And I really hope the government listens and takes urgent actions that these young people deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now go please to Deputy Sinead Gibney.
And thank you also to the Labour Party and to Deputy Wall for bringing this motion to the floor of the House today, to give us a chance to recognise those young carers in our society who contribute so much. And I would also like to welcome those who are in the gallery today. But to discuss the very important measures that are proposed within this motion. And I'm going to speak to a couple of those, and particularly I'm interested in the quality public services that are essentially lacking in our society, which require so much from family and informal carers, and then specifically to the means testing. But I do want to first acknowledge the experience of young carers, and I want to speak briefly about my own experience because I became a single mum at the age of 24, which is by today's discussion just on the border of young, I guess. And I also want to acknowledge that I was in a very privileged position of already having a university degree. I had even started my career, so I was able to put my life on hold for 18 months and take care of my daughter before I then returned to my career and got on with my life as a new mum. But for so many young carers and young adult carers, they have to put their lives completely on hold, or their lives are so disrupted that they can't continue with their education, with their social lives, with their friends. Simply being children is just no longer available to them because of the care responsibilities that they take on. And that, for me, is the result of purely a failure by this state to provide the quality public services that we believe should underpin a modern, progressive society that is really the bedrock of a social democracy. And we see time and again how the failure of those disability services, health services, respite services are failing in all quarters of society and putting immense pressure on various groups in society, single parents being one of them, as I mentioned, and it's Single Parents' Day tomorrow, just for the record. So a particular shout out to all the single mums out there and people parenting alone. But I think really when we think about this motion in particular and what's flowing from it, one of the big issues that we know is really prevalent, and certainly in my constituency there were so many people during the election who raised this with me, is the means testing of the carers allowance, because really what we're doing is essentially punishing people for providing a service which our society needs so badly and which serves communities and families everywhere. And people are just at their wits' end. And although we did see so much talk about this during the election, I have concerns over the speed at which this is being addressed, and I really want to urge the Minister and the Government to please progress this as quickly as possible so that people can actually get out from underneath poverty, from underneath the pressure that they're in to advocate for themselves whilst they're providing this service. And all of it says to me that we have a much bigger conversation to have in this country about care. Care is a gendered issue as well, but overall care is either unpaid or underpaid. And unfortunately, all of these are going to be symptoms of that until we deal with it. It flows from our constitution even, where although we do name-check care within our constitution, it's done in a terribly gendered and a terribly archaic way. So we have so much to do in just simply acknowledging what is contributed by family carers and informal carers to our economy, to our society, and all of the value that that provides. And also to talk about it in the context of artificial intelligence, because actually one of the few areas of labour that will not be displaced by AI is care. We cannot automate care. We cannot automate the caring of those around us, and that applies to the teaching and nursing professions as well. So if we were forward-thinking, if we can be progressive in really identifying that and nurturing and valuing that care, then I think we will see a lot of gain in society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Gibney. We now return to the independent groupings. So number one is Deputy Richard Boyd-Barrett for 4.5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks to Deputy Wall and to the Labour Party for bringing forward this important motion, and can I also commend Family Carers Ireland and all the young carers who have brought this issue to our attention, and to say that we fully support the motion, and I know the government are not opposing it, but hope that they're going to do more than just not oppose it and take seriously this motion, which I assume has been drawn up in consultation with Family Carers Ireland and with the young carers themselves. So you are hearing, and can I apologise I wasn't at your briefing today, I was just out the door with meetings and whatnot, but and I have to say I'm not an expert in this area. I've come across a lot of the issues to do with carers, but I'm staggered as I was reading into this, and I know the ESRI have done a very lengthy paper on the whole issue, which is detailing a lot of the facts and figures and issues confronting young carers. But I am really staggered by the bare bones of it, that we have 67,000 young carers between the ages of 10 and 17. I mean, that is absolutely stunning. Looking after parents and siblings with disability, with chronic illness, when they're children, at a time when they need to develop and have a life and be educated, have a social life. It should be the beginning of a life flourishing, and because of love and care and concern for their loved ones, they find themselves caring, washing people, cleaning up, feeding people, looking after them, and that then impacting disproportionately 6 times more likely those young people to suffer the symptoms of depression, significantly impacting on their results in the Leaving Cert, according to the ESRI, making more likely they will suffer from things like poverty and financial distress, unhappiness, and so on, because they are engaged in an act of love and care for their loved ones and doing all of society a favour. So I seriously hope, because I've learned from just reading into this and from reading the motion, about the huge service these young people are doing to our society and to tens of thousands of people who need help and care, that the government are listening
and are going to do absolutely everything. I mean, they should, of course, immediately abolish the carers means test and do a lot more in terms of the income poverty that carers suffer in general, but they have an even greater obligation to young people and children, given the role they are playing in providing this care. I mean, the sheer economics of it is obvious, although we shouldn't even have to put it in these terms. But the savings from carers are about 20 billion a year. That's nearly the entire health budget. Right? So if these young people and other carers weren't providing the care they did, we'd have to double the health budget, pretty much. That's the service they are doing for our society. So it's behold on the government to listen to what these young carers are saying, but you absolutely have our support for all your efforts, and well done for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you, Deputy Boyd Barrett. We now go to Deputy Brian Stanley.
Thanks, Caherlock. And first of all, let me welcome this motion from the Labour Party. I think the proposals in it are very, very sensible and should be implemented. I also want to acknowledge the work of Family Carers Ireland and the young carers, some of whom are here, and indeed in Laois Offaly Family Carers Association, the work that they do. The means test needs to be abolished. Carers are on call 24/7. It's not like any other job. They live on small incomes. It's important that that's recognised. It places a huge burden on them. It basically takes over their whole life, and it determines what they can do, whether they can socialise, whether they can have friends, whether they can do any other part-time work. It's a huge call on people, and I think we need to accept that. The young carers under 18, and like others have spoken, certainly when I read the figures, it surprised me. I have to say that while I'm aware of some carers, just the breadth of the issue, I think, is very significant. And the number of them under 18 is probably well over 70,000 at this stage in 2025. They are a very separate group. They are providing great support in an unpaid capacity. They are trying to maintain their education. They are trying to, keep going, maybe hold down a part-time job as well, do all sorts of things while doing this. And that number will increase because our population is getting older. We know this. And we need to try and keep people in their own home, people who have disabilities and illnesses. This group is helping us to do that, and we need to acknowledge that. The effects, it puts a huge strain on the mental health of carers, young and old, but particularly for a young person in their formative years, under 18 years of age. It must put a huge burden on them. I know it can be difficult enough for people my age, who have been, through the trials and tribulations of life, but for young people in adolescence and teenage years, it must be very, very difficult and really affect them in terms of the strains and stresses that it puts on them. It affects their education, as I said, and the Department of Education, need to recognise this. It's important to try and keep young people in the school system. That does mean providing extra supports, and particularly for young carers. These young people could be dealing with addiction situations in the household. They can be dealing with a mental health issue. It could be physical health, and it could be all three. It could be all three. This is really serious. So we do need to provide those supports. The rules that cover the carers allowance and other income supports, they often act as a huge barrier to continuing in education and cause problems within the workforce as well around training and promotion. So the programme for Government Minister, young carers aren't recognising it. I think that if you're going to do a review of it any time, I think you should include them in it. But more importantly, is to act on this motion now. We need commitments to support this group. The government must commit to, as proposed in the motion, to put in place the cross-departmental group on young carers and designate a department that will have lead responsibility and committed to developing the dedicated service or dedicated programme and supports that are called for here. I think to identify as well the carers, that's very important, because sometimes they'll be hidden. Some people keep these things very privately, but it may affect them in their school and in their education and in their social life. So the Minister for Education, and indeed the lead minister here in this department now, is a former Minister of Education and a former school principal, so she knows what we're talking about here. Will recognise the responsibility to put proper targeted programmes in place to support young people, to keep them in education. So the government, as I started off, said must recognise fully the unpaid work of these carers, the amount of work that they're doing, the savings in the state, and they must guarantee some respite days and the young carers grant alongside bursaries for education, counselling and psychology support. So I'm asking the government to bring forward their plan. I think this is very reasonable what's in this motion. Government said they're not opposing it. I welcome that you're not opposing it, but this often happens here. I'm watching this here for 14 years. Sometimes you come in here and you want to oppose a motion, but will you act on it? And that's the question going out here today. You know, take action on this. Young carers need it, and I appeal to you to do it.
Thank you. Deputy Paul Murphy, please.
Thanks a lot, Chair. And thanks a lot to the Labour Party for bringing forward this motion, and for Family Carers Ireland, and the young carers who have campaigned around it. And like Deputy Stanley said, I welcome the fact that the government is not opposing the motion, but I definitely warn Family Carers Ireland, young carers watching this, that there's a big gap between not opposing a motion and actually implementing what is passed in the motion. If the last government even had just implemented 50% of what was passed in this Dáil, we would be in a much, much better place as a country than we are. So the pressure needs to be kept up. Because really what is outlined in the motion is the very bare minimum that the state should be doing to support young carers. It is nothing short of outrageous that the rules covering carers allowance and other income supports are still so restrictive that they prevent young adult carers from going to college or taking up training or job opportunities. So these are people, as has been mentioned, effectively doing free labour for the state out of love for mostly a family member, and then being punished from that, being prevented from being able to kind of continue their life alongside the care that they're providing. The entire system of means testing for carers payments needs to go. All carers, including young carers, should be entitled as a right to the equivalent of a living wage. That would recognise in a real, material, impactful way the incredibly important work that they do and the vast amount of money that is saved by the state as a consequence of that work. It is striking, it is shameful that 1 in 4 young carers have gone to bed or to school hungry. I mean, that's a direct result of the social protection system refusing effectively to recognise the existence of well over 67,000 young carers aged between 10 and 17. I would say that kind of underlying this issue, underlying the horrendous kind of forgotten way that young carers are treated, is the need for a transformation in the whole mindset and approach towards care in our society. And this again and again reflects itself in debates that we have here in terms of how carers are treated, but also how services are provided for disabled people, how supports are provided for older people, how provision is made for children with additional needs. Again and again and again, effectively the kind of default position of the state is to say that this is on the family in one way or another. That it's on the family, it's on young carers, it's on children to provide all the care that people need. And that should not be the default position. The onus should be on the state. Effectively, that was the crux of the yes-no referendum campaign last year, and it's at the heart of why the state is failing carers and children with additional needs so badly. And I think, any idea that the role of the state should only be to provide funding and respite, and obviously that is the bare minimum, the fact that we have to talk and campaign for respite for children effectively, but it must be much more than that. The idea that fundamentally we leave care in the hands of carers, private individuals in the family home. Okay, we compel you, we force you hopefully to give something in terms of money, in terms of respite. It needs to be much more than that. The state shouldn't be able to just offload its responsibility onto somebody, onto anybody else, rather than providing services that should be provided as a right. And this, you go from the very foundation of the state, effectively, in terms of the role of the church and so on. And the state never just provided the kind of basic public services that were provided in other European states, instead outsourcing on the one hand to the church in various forms, and on the other hand, kind of passing off responsibility onto the family. And that gets to the heart of why we debate these issues again and again, and why carers and young carers in particular are failed so badly. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Murphy. We now go, please, to Deputy Paul Gogarty for 2 minutes.
I'd like to thank the Labour Party for bringing this very important issue onto the agenda for discussion, and I note and thank the government side for not opposing it. There have been quite a number of studies carried out on this area in Ireland. However, it hasn't really been enacted. Now, Family Carers Ireland provided a wealth of information to members here today and a lot of supports for young carers. But back in one of the studies done in NUI Galway, it found that there was limited data on young carers in Ireland, and that most of the focus is on adult family carers. That's why this debate is hugely important today, because there's no national legislation, policy or mainstream supports for young carers in Ireland. And I would say in this, among lots of other things, we're in breach of various UN conventions. I note all the comments and contributions made by other people in terms of the carers allowance, in terms of respite care, and in terms of the impact on the outcomes for the young children who are involved in caring for families. So I'm not going to go into that. But one of the NUIG studies did show a couple of recommendations, and that is practical supports for young people in the home, emotional supports, actual just time to be with friends rather than formal respite, but also, and most importantly, and we have a very limited contribution period here, some way for carers to be able to make contact with service providers to reach out, because I'm sure, not including the 67,000, there's lots of others who haven't been contacted and outreach to. So I'd like to support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Michael Collins for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I will, Independent Ireland will also be supporting this motion for young carers, and thank the Labour Party for putting forward this very important motion. It's astonishing to think that we have 67,000 young carers in this country, and we have, I'd say, given them nothing but maybe lip service over the last number of years, which, is an injustice to those young people, and many of them were in the gallery here today and outside earlier in the AV room. And I think that we need to show them the respect that they deserve, because looking after someone for actually for zero, for nothing, is a very unfair situation for a young person to find themselves in. And many, as I said, 67,000 have found themselves in that situation. And we, as a state, need to step up to the mark and show the respect that they deserve. And put measures in place, and we can see that, to be honest, the system of care, and to said here earlier today, I heard someone saying the system of care in this country is broken, and it certainly is, and we find that right down across the line, because when we means test carers allowance, that is actually telling you how out of touch a government is, continues to punish people who save the state millions of euros in this country. As I said, we have 67,000 young people. How many other adults are caring for loved ones at home, and as I said, are saving the state millions, but are literally being ignored by the state? Instead, the first thing you need to do, especially when there was, in a country where we're supposed to be led that there is money there at this present time, was to abolish the means test, and that would give people a chance to be at least recognised in some small way. It's not a lot of money. We're not talking about, 1,000 euros here, or we're talking for someone, it's maybe 250, 300 euros. It's small money, but it's recognition for what they do. And those loved ones will be in a hospital, in a nursing home, and requiring this type of care only for these people. And Minister, you need to understand here that changes need to be made immediately. And I've spoken already this week in relation to Section 39. I actually welcome the pay increase of 9.25% in the work relations agreement last week. But then we find out afterwards that the people, we'll say, people who care for loved ones are or care for families and who care for residents in nursing homes will not get that increase, and that's very unfair. And I've spoken to a lot. I've spoken to Ty Daly and I've spoken to different people this week who are badly, hurt by this decision. These are people that, show the hand of love every day of the week to people inside the nursing homes, and I saw it myself in Bishop's Court last week because I was invited to meet the residents there and the staff and the owners. But it doesn't matter if it's Bishop's Court, it doesn't matter if it's the Baltimore Residential Care Unit, it doesn't matter if it's in Clonakilty or Jiminy. All these people are providing a fantastic service. And the bottom line is here, the community hospital staff who do excellent jobs, very much the same as the nursing home staff do, are being adequately, at least being respected and adequately paid. But the person that does the same work in a nursing home is not being paid in relation to pay parity and not being paid a fair income. And it's a cause of deep hurt, and rightly so too, because these people, as I said, I saw the care last week, because some of the staff were able to tell me exactly who the person was, and there's a lot of people in Bishop's Court, a lot of residents in Bishop's Court, they were telling me who they were, where they're from. I'm not sure about my time. Michael, 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Come on. No, but I appreciate, Minister, that has to be looked into. It's very, very important.
Thank you. Fitzmaurice.
Today, welcome to the debate. I want to support the motion. The first thing is, I think, if any department, would you hear the Department of Finance talking that it will cost X amount if we get rid of the means test? Well, if these people decided, these carers decided that their loved ones, if they looked for putting them into a nursing home, to cost the state $1,100 every week, that's the facts of it. They're actually saving the state about €800 to €900 every week. And I've been in here for, 10 or 11 debates in carers, and everyone agrees with it, but the problem is nothing is changing. If a youngster wanted to go to college, because of this means test, and the way that it's done, you have to do so many hours. They could help their loved one in the morning. They could be near a college and come home in the middle of the day and in the evening. But just because they're going to college, you don't fit this criteria because you have to be there so many hours. Even though there's, over 140 or many hours in a week, and they believe that while they're gone for the few hours, they're not entitled to it. That's not the way to look after people. Second of all, we see it day in, day out, people that are give up their jobs, and maybe someone belonging to them has a fairly good job. But this means test, straight away, they're ruled out. And I cannot for the life of me understand how the Department of Finance, they'll throw out this every time there's a debate going on. They'll say, well, it should cost us over $1 billion. But you know what? I read in the paper last week or the week before that we as a country are prepared to throw 700 million to Europe out of our kitty for arms or for basically boosting Europe. But we're not prepared to look after the people that's helping others in this country. And I think as a Dáil and as a people, we should be basically looking at ourselves and which should we put first? Should we put and reward and help and recognise those people that are sacrificing their own lives by helping others and also helping the state, and we are not giving them basically the opportunity or the recognition that they deserve? Everyone that stands up here will talk about carers, all the great work they do. But at the end of the day, it's about pounds, shillings and pence. That's what keeps you going, and there's no point walking into a shop saying, I'm a great person that I look after my parents or whatever. That doesn't get you food. That doesn't help you pay rent. And I think that we either decide once and for all. I'd say it's the 11th or the 12th debate I've been in here about carers, and everyone goes out the door, and then we move on again, and there'll be another one in a few months' time, and everyone will stand up. It's time now that the government either decides, are they going to do something or are they not? It is recognised, I know under a programme for government, that they're going to do something. But like a programme for government, how long is a piece of string? A programme for government is 5 years. Is it going to be in June or July? Or is it going to be in 4.5 years' time, June or July? This is the facts, and these are the things that need answering. In my opinion, there's enough of debating done about it. Everyone knows the problem. It's that Department of Finance deciding that in the budget that they put in the funding that's required. And I'll tell you, I'd vote for it an awful lot sooner than I'd decide that we were going to go throwing money to Europe of 700 million for arms or something, rather than making sure that we look after our own people. There's a lot of things in this country we need to address: homelessness, carers, a lot of stuff, and people not even having a house. And we'd swear that we were printing money for other things then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now go please to Deputy Patrick Tolbeen.
Míle mágad cai hiarlaigh gan buchas an party lucht oibre marall an ruúin seo is ruúin má agus bhálams the takeíocht the hort don ruúin sin. I want to raise a couple of serious issues that are affecting both carers and people with disabilities at the moment. The Children's Disability Service Grant was announced with great fanfare by Minister Anne Rabbitte in October 23. It was to urgently provide services and therapies for children and to be allocated within weeks. And we were told that there were 52 organisations to benefit from this fund around the country. And the Taoiseach confirmed today that €8 million worth of applications were signed off by the HSE, but the money went nowhere. I think that's an absolute scandal, Minister, and how any government could be so harsh and hurtful in terms of badly needed funds is absolutely incredible. In recent weeks, I've also been made aware of the huge issue facing children with disabilities who are being treated at primary care centres around the country. It would appear that it is now the norm for children who are being referred from primary care to their local CDNT that supports drop off a cliff as soon as that referral happens, not when they actually get the service from the CDNT, but when the referral actually starts. That leaves these children in limbo without the services they need, and many of those children unfortunately regress as a result of that. Another scandal that we aim to uncovered was the issue of disability allowance. Data that we received showed that 68% of people who appealed Department of Social Protection decision to refuse the disability allowance were successful in their appeals. Now, what that means is in the last 10 years, 58,000 people appealed the Department's decision on disability allowance, and of those who appealed, 40,000, or 68%, were subsequently granted the allowance. So the state basically told 40,000 people, you're not entitled to the disability allowance, and then turned around and said, actually, you are entitled to the disability allowance. So what does that mean for the large number of people who appealed, were refused, and then left it at that, didn't go back and appeal it in the end? I believe that there should be a full audit done of all of these cases to see where people entitled to that disability allowance, and where they were, they need to be paid back to the date they applied in the first place. Another issue that's really affecting people, and information that I've just got in the last 24 hours, is the level of vacancies in CDNT across the country. It's incredible. Right now, there are 817 vacancies in CDNTs across the country. In CHO Area 1, Donegal, Cavan, Monaghan and Leitrim and Sligo, there's been a fall of 22% in the therapy hours in the space of 1 year. The HSE is one of the biggest employers of CDNT staff. 44% of those positions are actually vacant at the moment. 43% of all psychologists' posts are currently vacant which is an incredible figure. And if you actually look at CHO1 and CHO5, the figures are 62% and 59% as well. If you're not going to employ psychologists, psychiatrists and staff in these local areas for children with disabilities who need supports, they will not get supports. And if they won't get supports, they won't get the help that they need to reach their potential. And indeed, in many, many cases, you'll have situations where life will become incredibly difficult for them and for their carers as well. I think it's an absolute scandal that the very basic staff needed in these services are, in some cases, majority vacant, and that has to change. Gur Margaret.
Thank you very much, Deputy Tolbeen. We now go back, please, to the government, to Minister Christopher O'Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach. And first of all, can I just welcome members of Family Carers Ireland to the gallery, and I'm sure there are carers here as well, and note that we really appreciate your attendance, and also to note the motion from Labour here today, which sheds light on a very, very important matter that we absolutely have to tackle and deal with. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on this motion and on the important role young carers play in Ireland today. I would also like to thank my colleague, Minister Norma Foley, for her comprehensive remarks earlier, which really showcase the extent of the work that is currently being done and will be done by government to support carers. Minister Foley's remarks made it clear that this government places extraordinary value on the work that is done by carers, and one that is committed to continuing to develop these supports reflected clearly in the programme for government. We are acutely aware that carers, and particularly young carers, have a complex variety of needs, including social and educational requirements that must be addressed by a whole of government department approach. In that spirit, my colleagues and I across government are committed to working together to address these needs and to providing the appropriate supports that carers, and especially young carers, need to ensure that they feel supported. In that, it is vitally important that we take the time to listen to the voices of carers themselves, to hear their stories, their experiences, their hopes for the sector. And in that, the programme for government has made great strides in responding to many of these concerns raised and will continue to guide the government in how we support carers going forward. As expressed earlier by Minister Foley, these include financial commitments such as raising the carer support grant to its highest ever rate, the extension of the carers benefit to self-employed for the first time, as well as increasing the earnings limit from €450 to €625 after tax, and of course the gradual phasing out of means tests for the carers allowance, which will take place throughout the lifetime of this government. The programme for government also includes commitments around access to employment, training and education supports, and this will be led both by the Departments of Social Protection, Dormant Accounts Fund, Action Plan 2024, and the Department of Education's Wellbeing Policy and Framework. In March 2024, an interdepartmental working group examining supports for family carers was established. The working group is chaired by the Department of Social Protection, with membership of the group including the Department of Health and the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. The work of the interdepartmental working group will be informed by a broader review of means testing underway by the Department of Social Protection, the National Carer Strategy led by the Department of Health, and work being carried out by the Department of Children, Equality, Disability and Integration and Youth under the Action Plan for Disability Services 2024 to 2026 to increase family resilience and provide extra supports for family carers. The interdepartmental group will report its findings to the Ministers for Health, Social Protection and Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. I would also like to highlight the health and social care supports provided by the state that help support family carers, including young carers. Minister Foley spoke earlier about the Carers Guarantee, which aims to standardise supports for family carers regardless of where they live in the country. Services such as home support, personal assistance, day centres and Meals on Wheels also support both people with care needs in receipt of those services and their family carers, empowering them to take a break from their caring role and look after their own health and well-being. The government has increased investment in home support services for older people from €495 million in 2020 to approximately €833 million in 2025. Delivery of home support hours has increased from 17.9 million hours in 2019 to over 24 million hours in 2025, providing support to 57,000 people in receipt of home support services. Funding for both Meals on Wheels and daycare services have also been maintained for Budget 2025, allowing over 300 Meals on Wheels organisations and almost 300 HSC-funded daycare centres to operate throughout the country. Respite care is a vital part of the toolkit to support carers. Respite care may involve providing alternative family or residential care for inter alia older people, people with physical and intellectual disabilities, mental health conditions, chronic conditions, palliative care needs, or addiction to enable the carer to take a short break or holiday or rest. Respite may be provided in the community within the person's own home, in HSC residential care settings, by agreement with voluntary organisations, or by contracted private facilities. It may involve day or overnight respite. There has been a significant increase in funding for respite and disability service, increasing from 49.3 million in 2020 to 134.4 million in 2024. This allowed for 120,515 overnights and 48,099 day respite sessions to be accessed by 6,640 people with disabilities last year. In 2021, the Home Support Emergency Respite Scheme has been in operation since 2021, the Home Support Emergency Respite Scheme has been in operation providing emergency respite services either by placement of an in-home care worker or the temporary placement of the care recipient outside the home to deal with the emergency situations. Funding of €600,000 was allocated by the HSE to Family Carers Ireland both in 2023 and 2024 to deliver the scheme and provide 27,000 hours of respite per year. Cathaoirleach, this is a government that supports and will continue to support carers' rights throughout the country. It recognises the challenges that carers, especially young carers, face day to day, and it is ambitious in its commitment to ensure that they receive the necessary access to training, financial and wellbeing resources to ensure that they can continue in their caring responsibilities. We will continue to listen to the voices that matter most, the carers themselves and their advocates, and to continue to do everything we can to ensure carers and young carers feel supported and empowered to provide their vital care and ensure that they are recognised for their significant efforts. And just to say, look, in listening to the debate, and I listened in my office and as I came in as well, and look, I totally appreciate the comments made, many very accurate, many, I suppose, underlining the need to do more. And again, I'd like to welcome Family Carers Ireland and the carers that are here today. And Deputy Gibney and Stanley and Murphy reference the means test and the need to abolish that means test. And that is a commitment within the lifetime of this government. And I know there is a need and an urgency to do it as quickly as possible. And I know that that is the direction of travel of this government. And we are increasing those income thresholds to allow more people to be able to avail of carers allowance. Deputy Boyd Barrett and Stanley, you both mentioned something that is really important, and that is the impact that this is having on young people. These incredible young people who are taking it upon themselves or in situations where they're caring for older ones or siblings, they're extraordinary. But of course it's having an impact, and you're right, you reference mental health, you reference access to education. So we do need to take steps in terms of addressing that. And that's, I guess, where the carers guarantee comes in, something that we are committed to, and it is a programme for government commitment, so that they can access counselling, they can access supports, they can access education, and those supports that are vital to ensure that they have good outcomes and that their well-being is looked after. Many deputies mentioned the need for increased respite, and of course, being a constituency TD as well, I understand the desperate needs of many carers in particular for increased and expanded respite. And that's why that is another programme for government commitment to expand the emergency respite, and it's something that we will also focus on. We do know, and as Mr Foley outlined, carers benefit. Some young carers over the age of 16 can avail of some of those supports, financial supports, but I absolutely accept that some fall outside that as well. And look, there is a good reason we're supporting this motion and we're not opposing it. There are many elements in this motion that we need to listen to and take on board. For that reason, I want to thank Labour for tabling this motion. We often have, and it's often highlighted in here by both opposition and backbenchers in government, the need to do more for carers. It's good that we're focusing on young carers in particular. It's an area that doesn't get the focus that it needs sometimes. So I welcome this opportunity to debate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Sullivan. We now go to the Labour Party, please. First up is Deputy O'Donoghue. 4 minutes.
I want to congratulate, first of all, my colleague Deputy Mark Wall for bringing this important motion forward. I stand here on behalf of thousands of young carers across Ireland, children, teenagers, young adults, who take immense responsibilities at home, often at great personal cost. They provide essential care for family members with disabilities, illness, mental health conditions and addiction. Their contributions too often go unnoticed. This year's Young Carers Action Day on the 12th of March carried the theme, "Give me a break." This is more than just a theme, it's a call to action, action which my colleague Deputy Wall has taken up for the Labour Party. It reminds us all of the sacrifices, struggles and the needs of young carers, and that acknowledging them is not enough. We must push for meaningful legislative change. Young carers juggle school, home duties and emotional burdens that many adults would struggle to bear. Yet their needs go unrecognised. Many experience stress, social isolation and difficulties in education or employment. They often miss out on the simple right just to be young. Supporting them cannot fall on one sector alone. It requires a cross-departmental approach. The Department of Children, Education, Health, Employment must work together to identify and support young carers from early on. Schools and colleges need dedicated, trained staff to recognise and to assist young carers. They must ensure that young carers are included in care plans and have access to mental health support. Employers should create pathways for young carers to access work opportunities with flexible arrangements that can acknowledge their responsibilities. By taking this joined-up approach, we can ensure young carers are not left behind, that no one falls through the cracks. They deserve, as they mentioned earlier on today, our recognition, support and opportunities. It's our duty to ensure they receive this support. This means better respite services, flexible policies, financial assistance for families in need. It means acknowledging their contributions and easing their burdens. I want to give a shout out to the young people that we met in the AV room earlier on, Benjamin, Sarah Ann, Lucy and Connor, who shared their powerful stories with us, both positive and negative, and the struggles that they need to endure. I'd also like to acknowledge the work of Family Carers Ireland, especially Niamh Finucane and Elaine O'Hara. So let's commit to these young carers and the 67,000 other young carers across Ireland. Their contribution to society is too invaluable to ignore. So when we say, give me a break, our response must be a resounding yes. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you very much. We now go, please, to Deputy Conor Sheehan for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach. And first of all, I would like to thank and welcome our visitors to the gallery here today, and thank the Minister and for his comprehensive response. And it would be remiss of me to speak about young carers without acknowledging our 2024 Limerick Person of the Year, Ellen Gannon from Newcastle West in County Limerick, who cares for her two brothers, 9-year-old twins Andrew and James, who are both autistic. Minister, today we heard very powerful testimony from 4 young carers, Connor, Lucy, Benjamin and Sarah Ann, and I commend them for coming in to speak to us. And young carers exist in the shadows, with their work often going unnoticed outside the home. They're at greater risk of mental and emotional difficulties, more likely to be bullied and more prone to experiencing food poverty. And caring is also a risk factor for children and young people's mental health and well-being. And this is often little understood, and it's often invisible by professionals and policy makers. Minister, I want to raise an important initiative that UL, my own local university, launched to raise awareness of UL students who are family carers, and this could and should be replicated in second level and primary level schools across the country. They've developed the expertise, they've also developed a model, and we just need the political will in order to push this forward, because there are over 15,000 young carers in student carers in higher education throughout the country. And it's something that's really negatively affecting the educational attainment of our young people. It's causing people to drop out of or to reconsider going to third level. And I also want to talk about the need for specific training for teachers who need to be equipped to identify young carers, and this could and should be done through the in-service programme, because often teachers don't know. They think, for example, a student might be late, a student might not be doing their homework, etc. And a student, you know, is often a carer. They may be up half the night. They may have duties in the home that supersede what they do at school. And we also really badly need a single point of contact in every school for young carers to approach if they are struggling, if they are late, if they have to deal with just the embarrassment of having to constantly explain themselves. So As I referenced above, I would really like the government to engage with the substance of the motion, but particularly engage with the two issues I raised in relation to education. And we also, finally, we need to see a plan for the income disregard as to when and how that will be phased out over the lifetime of the government. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Deputy Sheehan. Deputy Alan Kelly.
Thank you, Chairperson, and want to thank my colleague Deputy Wall, who has been an advocate in this for some time, indeed his dad before him as well, and acknowledge the work of Family Carers Ireland. It's a unique motion, it's a very niche motion. This is a group that can't stand up for themselves, Minister, and I was a bit disappointed in your response and in the Minister's response, because we've discussed carers in here quite a bit. We've never really gone into the depth of discussing young carers and their difficulties, and there's tens of thousands of them in this country. And we really need to do that. Because, you know, the impact it has on these people in their health, their education, their future, their opportunities in life is dramatic and can be impactful for long beyond their youth. And somebody needs to kind of say this out loud, so I will. As a state, we're actually trading on their emotional commitment to their family members. And that's a fact. And the state is letting them down, because obviously we don't have the appropriate facilities, health provision, education provision, other provisions for the people they are caring for. And particularly often when it's parents, it's necessarily elderly care. So we're trading on their emotional commitment to their family members. And we're almost robbing them of the same opportunity of people of the same age. And by doing so, we're preventing them having the same enjoyment of life, same educational opportunities, the capacity to be ambitious for themselves, the capacity to live their lives in a way which may be different to the way they are doing it. And we really need to deal with this. So, Minister, this isn't mentioned in the programme for government. So what I'd really like you to take out of this is as follows. What are we going to do? There's tens of thousands of people affected here. We need a detailed programme of supports across government. We need, primarily at the very beginning, to identify who these people are, because they're actually not categorised, whether it's young carers under the age of 18 or young adult carers. We need targeted programmes. We need to ensure that they are not impacted from social protection allowances because of what they are doing. We need targeted healthcare supports for family members. And something that I think you really should take up, Minister, is the following. Is that if we're not going to provide them with some form of allowance for the work that they do, well, somewhere along the way we should help them with their educational requirements, whether that is financially, in grants, or in other ways. There has to be a way in which we can intercept and help these people as they advance in life for the sacrifice that they are making for their family members. So, Minister, we need a whole-of-government approach across all the issues that my party and others have said, and let's once and for all get to a point where we recognise the work that young carers do in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.